Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Sorastro's Blood Rage painting series. In this episode, we're going to paint the Troll from Simon's Blood Rage. The monsters in Blood Rage allow us to enjoy working with a wide range of skin colours, and for the Troll, I'll be aiming to create some warm, sunlit skin tones with some cooler, green-tinted hues in the shadows. Let's take a look at the painting stages. I've chosen to prime the Troll in black, followed with a Zenithal pre-shade exactly like we did for the Frost Giant in episode 1. We'll then provide the base colours, followed with some shades to help articulate the various textures on the miniature. For the highlights, I'll be focusing mostly on the skin tone, and we'll be introducing some green cast into the shadows to reflect the forest environment. Our finishing touches will include painting on the tattoos, as well as providing a scenic base. Let's begin. I'm going to begin by painting the skin, and we'll be using Bugman's Glow mixed with a little Loren Forest in a roughly 4:1 ratio. I'm adding the green to help desaturate the reds, producing a slightly more earthy skin tone. I'm using a Rosemary and Co Series 33 size 2 brush. Next I'm going to paint the loincloth with some Stormvermin Fur. For the hair, I'm using German Grey. If the paint is thin enough, then we'll still see the raised texture showing through, which will minimise the need for extensive highlights later on. For the golden adornments, I'm taking a simple base colour and shade approach, and I'm using Scale Colour's Elven Gold for the base colour. I like the tone and coverage of the Scale Colour metallics, but you could of course use whatever gold colour you like. Next I'm going to paint the various pieces of bone as well as the teeth using Ushabti Bone. I'm now going to paint the pieces of rope using Steel Legion Drab. And for the handle of the hammer, I'm using XV88. For the silver bracelet and decoration on the hammer, I'm using Leadbelcher. Next I'm going to paint the head of the hammer, and I've chosen to wet blend the tones to quickly create some effective gradients. For the mid-tone, I'm using Mechanicus Standard Grey, and I'm using roughly equal measures of black and white to achieve my dark and light tones respectively. Here on the left I'm mixing the darker tone, and on the right I'm mixing the lighter tone. I'm going to start with the lighter tone and paint the upper half of the upturned face of the hammer. I'm then going to use the mid-tone to paint the lower half, before blending the two together to create a rough gradient. I'm going to carry on working around the rest of the hammer, and will naturally be using the darker tones for the surfaces that are facing away from the light. Because the texture is quite rough and stony, our blending doesn't have to be especially smooth. I'm going to finish the base colours off by using some Karak Stone for the fingernails. With the base colours complete, we're ready to do some shading. I'm going to begin by shading the head of the hammer, using a 4:1 mix of Nuln Oil and Coelia Greenshade. The main reason I'm using the shades is to help articulate the texture on the model by darkening the recesses. The secondary effect of the shades is that they also alter the hue. If you wanted to save time here, you could just throw a simple brown and black shade over the entire miniature if you like, using perhaps a 2:1 mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. Next I'm going to use some pure Nuln Oil for the hair as well as the silver details. For the gold adornments, I'm using Agrax Earthshade mixed with a little Coelia Greenshade. And I'm using pure Agrax Earthshade for the handle of the axe. For the decorative bones and the loincloth, I'm using a 2:1 mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. I'm also using this for the teeth and to define the edges of the fingernails. Finally, for the skin, I'm going to add a hint of Coelia Greenshade to some Reikland Fleshshade, which I'm then thinning with some Lahmian Medium. The reason I've thinned the shade is simply to avoid overdarkening the skin tone. The mix is still concentrated enough to reinforce the textural details and provide some dark lining where the skin meets the clothes and jewellery. Once dry, we're ready to add the highlights. I'm going to begin by working on the most important area of the figure, the skin. Before starting, it's useful to consider where our light is coming from, and for this figure, I've decided to imagine a warm sunlight forming a slightly off-center overhead light source. From the front, my three brightest areas of highlight will be the hands and forearms, as well as the upper face area. And on the back, it will be the left shoulder. I'm going to create my midtones by taking my original Bugman's Glow and Loren Forest mix, and adding increasing quantities of Cadian fleshtone, which I'm also mixing with a little Loren Forest. On the left, you can see my original base tone, and on the right, I'm now mixing my Cadian fleshtone and Loren Forest. I'm now going to highlight the skin by lightening the base tone with my midtone in a couple of stages. I'm using these initial highlights to give a sense of volume to most areas of the skin. We can use a damp brush to feather the edges of our transitions for the larger areas. I'm now using the pure Cadian fleshtone and Loren Forest mix. You can see that I'm now beginning to focus more exclusively on the areas that I ultimately want to be the brightest areas of highlight that we mentioned earlier. For the upper highlights, I'm going to create a pale yellow by mixing Yriel Yellow with some white. I'm then going to use this to lighten my Cadian fleshtone and Loren Forest mix in a few stages. I deliberately want quite a yellowish tone to create the feeling of a warm sunlight filtering through the forest. I'm not too concerned with the feet since they'll eventually be mostly hidden by foliage. Naturally, I'm reducing the area of highlight the brighter I go. I'm now going to thin the pale yellow down with water and apply my last few highlights. Next I'm going to create a cooler shadow tone using equal quantities of Drakenhof Nightshade and Coelia Greenshade, thinned with some Lahmian Medium. I'm using this to darken the tone of the shadowed areas of the skin, whilst also introducing some cool green tones to create the impression of a green cast being given off from the surrounding forest. This also produces a slightly dirty, weathered look that suits the troll well. We can build up the depth of tone in 2 or 3 layers. I'm also going to introduce a little red to the nose area by diluting some Carroburg Crimson. I'm also going to apply some of the blue-green shade to the hammer. To finish the skin off, I'm now going to mix roughly equal measures of Loren Forest and Caliban Green. I'm then applying this quite thinly into the shadows to strengthen the impression of light bouncing up from the forest floor. Of course, the illusion won't make complete sense until we've applied the scenery to the base. I'm now finishing the skin off with a few final highlights. To highlight the other parts of the model, we can simply reuse the pale yellow highlight tone to lighten each of the original base tones. I'm starting by lightening some Mechanicus standard grey for the head of the hammer. Mixing the same colour into the various highlight tones on a figure helps to bring unity and create the impression that all parts are being lit by the same light source. Next I'm brightening some XV88 for the handle, once again by mixing in some other pale yellow. I'm now adding the yellow to some Ushabti Bone to highlight the bone accessories and the teeth. And we can do the same with the Stormvermin Fur for the loincloth. And I'm now lightening the German grey to highlight the hair. I'm not highlighting every strand here, but focusing more on the hair on the left side near the face. With the highlights complete, we're ready to add some finishing touches. I'm now going to give some texture to the base using Vallejo's brown earth. And whilst that's still wet, I'm going to add some optional forest ground cover. This can be sprinkled on and pressed gently into place. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to provide an application of Agrax Earthshade. Whilst that dries, I'm going to paint the eyes with a touch of ivory. Next, I'm going to paint some of the tattoos, approximating those we can see in the artwork. For that, I'm going to mix some black and Kantor Blue. I'm still using my Rosemary and Co size 2 brush for this. You can of course add as many or as few of these as you like. I'm now going to thin down some of my skin highlight tone and glaze this over the brighter sections of skin. This will help give the impression of the tattoo ink really being part of the skin rather than just sitting on top. I'm now using some of my mid-tone to glaze over the darker sections. Now the base is dry, I'm going to add some foliage, and you can of course use whatever basing materials you may have to hand. I'll include a full list of what I'm using in the video description. I'm sticking these down with superglue. I'm aiming for quite a lush and busy base with a variety of textures. With the base complete, I've chosen to add some interest to the hammer by painting on some green gemstones, starting with some Caliban Green. I'm then going to lighten this by mixing in some Moot Green. And I'm now highlighting the lower rim of each gemstone. We can lighten this further still. And I'm now using pure Moot Green. Finally, I'm going to mix some white into the Moot Green and provide a single spot of light at the top of each gemstone. If these turn out too large, we can always neaten them up with some Caliban Green. I've also decided to provide a green tint for the eyes by glazing on some of my Caliban and Moot Green mix. And I've chosen to add a few more tattoos to the left arm. Once done, we can go ahead and provide a protective matte spray. And I'm going to finish the troll off by applying some gloss varnish to the gemstones. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Don't forget, you can find details of the products used in the video description, along with links to where you can find me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. My sincere thanks as always go to the amazing patrons who are financing these videos. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Blood Rage. Happy painting!